The rifle was heavy, but my hands shook so badly that the cold steel was the last thing I felt. I was on the edge of the porch, hunkered down behind a rotting wooden pillar, just watching. The November morning air over the canyon was dry, sharp, a real bite, but the sweat was pouring off me under my thermal gear. I knew it wasn't her. It couldn't be. That thing stood about 50 yards away on the edge of the scrub pines, near where I usually parked my pickup. It had her body shape, the exact height. It was even wearing the red coat I had forbidden her from taking into the reservation because it was too eye-catching. But the way that thing held its head, the unnatural angle of the neck, was telling me something my mind absolutely refused to register. That thing didn't move. It just stared at the cabin, and then it made the noise. It wasn't Sarah's voice, but it was the imitation of her voice, a perfect replica, yet hollow, like the sound was being forced through a pipe full of sand. "Henry, it's cold out here. Where are you?" The sound was so real, it made my stomach churn. But the creature's mouth didn't open. I saw it. I was looking directly at the face, which appeared smooth, stretched too tight. That call came, somehow, from the center of its chest, or the back of its throat, but the lips didn't twitch. The way the body leaned to look for me in the porch shadows, clumsy, like an insect trying to reorient itself. I raised the rifle, the weight of the steel now the only solid thing in the world. The smell of sulfur, faint at first, was now strong, mixing with the scent of wet dirt. That wasn't an animal. It wasn't human. I couldn't shoot. But if I didn't shoot, it was going to cross the yard, and I'd have to face it at the door. I'm Henry, and what you just heard ain't fiction. I found these 3 accounts in the depths of a forum that deals exclusively with unresolved incidents in the American Southwest. These are stories that verge on folklore, but the rawness of the details and the trauma reported by those involved suggest that something much more concrete and terrifying took place. Today's focus is the skinwalker. In Navajo culture, speaking about the Yi Naldlushi is a dangerous taboo. It is an evil shaman, someone who has mastered the darkest magic, capable of transforming into any animal, or worse, any person, just to cause terror and death. We won't delve into the magic, but into the raw, devastating experience of facing something that looks human, but isn't. The first account is Henry's, which you just heard. His story began with the normality of an annual hunting trip. I rented that isolated cabin near the Painted Desert, right on the edge of the reservation, 5 years ago. It was my escape. Sarah, my wife, didn't like the heavy silence of November, but she let me go. I had supplies for 10 days, the intention of bagging a deer and then getting back to the routine in Flagstaff. Everything was normal. 4 days after I arrived, the silence cracked. It was around 3 in the afternoon. I was cleaning the rifle on the porch, staring out over the canyon, and I heard it. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. It was our code. Sarah whistled a fragment of an old song when she needed me. It was a specific sound, a high melancholy whistle, and it came from the bottom of the canyon, maybe half a mile away. I froze. Sarah was at home, 200 miles away. There was no way she could be there. I thought it was a hunter's prank, but the cadence was perfect. My head started pounding. I grabbed the radio, trying to call anyone. Silence. I went down. Curiosity, and the sickening fear that something had happened to my wife. that she'd driven out and crashed, forced me down the embankment. The walk to the point where the whistle came from was hellish. The terrain was dry, full of sharp cacti and loose rocks. When I reached the area, the whistling stopped. Silence returned, but it wasn't the natural silence of the desert. It was a suffocating, artificial silence. I saw the footprints. They weren't mine. They weren't deer or coyote. They were bare feet, human, but the impressions in the sand were too long and narrow, with toes strangely curled forward. The heel was deeply sunk, indicating unnatural weight. I followed the marks for about 30 yards until they stopped dead and morphed into something that looked like wolf paws, but huge. The paws led in a straight line, heading toward my cabin. Panic hit me. I sprinted back. My legs ached. My chest burned. I could only think of two things. The creature was near my home, and it was dressed in her clothes. When I got back to the clearing, the sun was setting, and the cabin's shadow was long and dark. And then I saw the figure near the pines. It was the red coat. The creature stood motionless. When it spoke, in that empty sound, calling my name, reality collapsed. I couldn't react for a full minute. I just looked at the way its shoulders seemed too wide for the body, and the manner in which it leaned on its hips in a way that defied gravity. There was no breath, no movement of the facial muscles, just the imitation of the voice. The smell of sulfur intensified. It was a smell I'd never encountered before, like hot tar mixed with rotting meat. I shot. I don't know where the bullet landed. I only know that the sound of the rifle was swallowed by a shriek that wasn't human. It wasn't the scream of a wounded animal. It was a loud, guttural sound, full of pain and satisfaction at the same time, as if it were celebrating its own death. The creature didn't fall. It threw itself to the ground. It didn't run. It scuttled into the darkness of the pines, using its arms and legs folded in a way that I can't describe without feeling sick. I saw the red coat being dragged through the dirt, and then it was gone. I didn't look for it. I went inside the cabin, grabbed the jerrycan of gasoline I used for the generator. I poured everything on the floorboards, the furniture, and struck a match. I burned that cabin to the ground. I didn't go back for the pickup. I walked. I walked all night until I hit the nearest town. I don't hunt anymore. I moved to Maine. I wake up every day smelling sulfur and hearing her whistle, the sound of the voice, perfect but empty. The second account comes from a young couple from Denver who decided to ignore the warnings and camp in a remote area near Canyon de Chelly, Arizona, in July 2017. The heat was oppressive, the landscape vast and unforgiving. Josh and I had just argued over the map. I was frustrated because he wanted to climb a trail that was clearly marked restricted, but he was stubborn. While I was setting up the tent, I heard him scream. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a sound of sheer shock. I called out. He screamed back, "Something big is here, Liz, get out." I didn't run. I grabbed the flashlight and went. The trail was steep, and the sun was nearly gone. I found him standing still, staring at the top of the cliff, which was maybe 600 feet high. He was pale. He pointed. "She's up there." "Who?" "The girl on the trail. The one who warned us not to climb." I heard her. She yelled my name and said her leg was broken. I looked at the top. No one could climb that without professional gear. It was a sheer, smooth rock wall. Impossible. But when I looked, I heard a thin voice coming from high above. "Help, Josh. It's dark. Please." It was a woman's voice. Perfect. It sounded very close, yet coming from an absurd altitude. Josh scrambled up, seized by panic. I screamed for him to stop, but he vanished among the rocks. I was left alone, staring into the canyon's darkness. The voice came again, now lower, closer, seeming to come from right behind me. You should have let him go. I spun around, flashlight on, but there was nothing except the footprints. They were strange, though not like Henry's. They were boot prints, but sunk too deep. I started screaming Josh's name, and that's when his voice answered. I'm coming back, Liz. I love you. It was his voice, but the sound had a metallic quality, and it came from two different places at the same time, from the top of the cliff and somewhere in the darkness of the trail just below me. I panicked. I ran back to the tent. I dove into the sleeping bag and turned the radio up to maximum volume. I was shaking so hard, my teeth were chattering. I heard something walking in the campsite. It wasn't walking, it was dragging itself. And then I heard the breathing. It wasn't human breathing, it was a dry sound, a slow hiss, as if a lung were filled with dirt. The sound stopped right next to my head, just outside the tent. And Josh's voice whispered, a foot away from me. Why did you run, Liz? You are a cowardly bitch. I will find you. The voice was exactly his. Dar phrase, something he would never say. It was the most horrific thing I have ever experienced. I lay there, listening to the artificial hiss of the breath drag itself away. I found Josh in the morning. He was tossed 3 miles away. He was in shock, but physically unharmed. He swore the skinwalker had lured him to the top of the cliff, imitating my scream. When he got there, he only found a hole in the earth and silence. He managed to escape in the confusion, but he never trusts my voice anymore. Never. He makes me write notes for everything. The third account is the most recent, from 2021. It's from a Border Patrol agent, CBP, who was on duty in the Lukeville, Arizona area. The area is desolate. Few people and a lot of traffic from smugglers and migrants. I'm Joe. I work patrol. We're used to seeing weird stuff, but nothing compares to what happened the night of September 14th. We got a call from a local rancher, Mike Teller. Coyote attack, they said. We arrived at 11 p.m. The ranch was surrounded by barbed wire, and we had surveillance cameras in all the blind spots. I found Teller lying near the corral gate. It wasn't a coyote attack. The body was intact, no large bite marks, but he was completely drained of blood. He looked like an animal carcass that had been hung out to dry. There were no coyote prints. There was something else. On the concrete ground, near the body, there were 2 deep marks, as if a very heavy object had dropped there. Heel marks, but the rest of the impression was strange, stretched. These marks indicated that something moved very fast, but didn't run like an animal. The trauma hit when we reviewed the security footage. The recording was full of static around 10:15 p.m. On the screen, I saw Teller leave the house with a flashlight. He was going to check the cattle. 15 seconds later, the frame flickers. When the image stabilizes, you see a black shape on all fours running along the fence. It was too fast, and then it stopped. The shape stood up, but it wasn't a man standing up. It was a twisting motion. The knees bent backward, the spine stretched, and the body elongated, becoming thin and tall. It looked like bones were being ground inside. The thing stood upright for half a second. It was the height of a basketball player, The head was small, rounded, and disproportionate to the body. The recorded sound was what made me vomit in the scrub. It wasn't a scream. It was the sound of metal being scraped against glass. And at the end, the sound of something breaking very quickly, like a ceramic plate being crushed. The creature attacked, and the camera dropped with the impact. The attack lasted less than 10 seconds. The agency filed the case as an atypical wild animal death, but all of us who saw the footage know what it was. I requested a transfer. I don't sleep anymore without the light on. Looking at that thing, seeing the way it transformed itself to resemble death, it destroys your mind. It's not a beast. It's conscious malice. It is difficult to process the idea of something that feeds on terror and imitation. These accounts don't have the clean structure of the legends we are told. They are brutal. They are about the destruction of trust in reality. The Skinwalker doesn't just kill. It breaks you first, using the voice of the one you love, using the image of the one you trust. If you have experienced anything similar, if you live in those areas, be careful. Silence is a weapon, and the voice of someone you know might be your biggest warning. If you felt the raw dread of these stories, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Here on Sloom Room, the truth is always harsher than the legend.